When Quentin died, I thought my life was over. 38 years together, and suddenly, nothingness. The house on Elm Street, which we bought when we were young, began to feel huge and uncomfortable. Every creak in the floorboards reminded me of his footsteps. Every morning I woke up and for a split second forgot that he was gone, and then reality hit me with renewed force. Tabitha called every day for the first 2 weeks after the funeral. My only daughter had always been practical, even too much so. While I was trying to pick up the pieces, she was already planning my future. "Mom, you need to sell the house," she said during one of our calls. "It's too big for you to live in alone, and it's expensive to maintain." "I'm fine, Tabitha," I replied, even though I didn't believe a word I was saying. "You could move in with us in Sherville. We have plenty of room. The kids would love to see their grandmother every day, not just on holidays." I hesitated. The thought of leaving the house where I had spent most of my life caused me physical pain, but loneliness scared me even more. "Think about it, Mom," Tabitha insisted. "You'll sell the house, put the money in the bank, and you'll have a financial cushion, and you'll live with us, surrounded by family." After the third conversation like this, I gave in. Maybe she was right. Maybe I really did need to move on. The house sold quickly, much faster than I expected. The real estate agent said I was lucky with the market and got more than the original appraisal. I put the money in my account, as Tabitha had advised. It made me feel secure, even though I wasn't used to having that kind of money in my account. Quentin and I had always lived modestly. He worked as an engineer for the city government, and I was a file clerk at a construction company. We weren't poor, but we weren't rich either. We saved a little bit at a time for a rainy day. And then it came, the rainiest day of my life. Moving to Sherville was like jumping into cold water. I left everything familiar and dear to me, packing my life into a dozen boxes. I had to sell or give away most of our furniture, keeping only the most valuable items, a mahogany chest of drawers that belonged to my mother and a rocking chair where Quentin loved to read in the evenings. Tabitha and her husband Vinton welcomed me with open arms. Their two-story house in the suburbs was spacious and modern, nothing like our old cozy home. I was given a room on the first floor, Vinton's former study, hastily converted into a bedroom. "You'll be more comfortable here, Mom," Tabitha explained. "You won't have to climb the stairs." I didn't argue, although at 61 I was perfectly capable of climbing stairs. Quentin always said I had more energy than many 30-year-olds. The first few weeks were filled with hustle and bustle and mutual politeness. I tried to be helpful. I cooked dinner, picked up Jasper and Rosamond from school, and helped with the cleaning. The grandchildren seemed happy to have me around, especially 13-year-old Rosa, who often came into my room to talk or just sit with me while I knitted. But gradually I began to notice tension. It showed in little things, in the way Vinton fell silent when I entered the room, in Tabitha's irritated glances when I offered to help with dinner. "Mom, I've got everything planned," she would say with a forced smile. "Just relax." Rest was the last thing I wanted. I had been active my whole life, and inactivity depressed me. But I didn't want to cause any problems, so I gave in. One evening, about 2 months after I moved in, Tabitha came home with news. "Vinton got a promotion," she announced at dinner. "We're going to celebrate this weekend. We're having a small party for his colleagues." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased. "How can I help?" "Nothing, Mom. We've ordered catering." She paused. "Actually, maybe you should visit your friend Muriel that day, just so the house isn't so crowded." Muriel was my only acquaintance in Sherville, a former colleague of Tabitha's who had retired last year. We had met a couple of times for coffee, but I wouldn't call her a friend. "Sure," I agreed, feeling a twinge of hurt. "I'll give her a call." That night, lying in bed, I wondered for the first time if I had done the right thing by moving here. Maybe I should have stayed in my hometown among friends and familiar places. But what's done is done. I decided I had to adapt to my new reality. The next few weeks brought new disappointments. Vinton, usually quiet and reserved, began to show irritation over little things. "Irma, I can't find the TV remote," he said one evening as he walked into the living room where I was reading a book. "It's on the coffee table, Vinton," I replied, pointing to the remote. "I asked you not to move my things," he said through clenched teeth. even though I knew for a fact that I hadn't touched the remote. Tabitha had changed, too. Her concern became intrusive and patronizing. She controlled what I ate, how much time I spent in front of the TV, and even commented on my clothes. "Mom, that sweater makes you look older," she said one morning. "Why don't you wear the blue one I gave you for Christmas?" I changed in silence, feeling a dull irritation growing inside me. I had made my own decisions all my life and didn't need instructions on what to wear at 61. Money became another stumbling block. Tabitha regularly reminded me about the electricity and water bills, which had gone up a little since I arrived. I offered to help out financially, and she readily agreed. So I started transferring her a monthly amount that I thought covered my expenses and even a little extra, as a token of my gratitude. But even that didn't improve the atmosphere. On the contrary, I noticed that Tabitha began to talk about money more often and take an interest in my savings and pension. "You're still getting Dad's pension, right?" she asked one day at breakfast. "Yes, his share of the pension went to me after he died," I replied, surprised by the question. "And how much is that a month?" "Tabitha, why are you asking?" "I'm just curious, Mom. I want to make sure you're doing okay financially." I responded evasively, but the conversation left a bad taste in my mouth. Quentin had always believed that financial matters were a private matter, and I shared that opinion. Vinton also started asking strange questions. "Irma, what are you planning to do with the money from the sale of the house?" he asked one evening when we happened to meet in the kitchen. "That kind of money shouldn't just sit in an account. Investments, you know." "I haven't decided yet, Vinton," I replied. "But thank you for your concern. I could recommend a few good options. I have a financial advisor I know." "I'll think about it," I promised, having no desire whatsoever to follow his advice. In the fall, the situation worsened. Jasper, my 15-year-old grandson, was going through a difficult teenage period. He became withdrawn, rude, and often snapped at his parents. Once I heard him yelling at Tabitha because she wouldn't let him go to some party. "All normal parents let their kids go out. You're always controlling everything." "Normal parents care about their children's safety," Tabitha replied. "And besides, you have an algebra test tomorrow. You said so yourself." "Who cares? I'm going to be a dumb loser like everyone else in this family anyway." After that, the door slammed and silence fell. I sat in my room, not knowing whether to intervene. Raising children is a matter for parents, and I tried not to offer advice, but my heart ached for both of them, my grandson and my daughter. That evening, when Jasper had locked himself in his room and Vinton hadn't come home from work yet, I found Tabitha in the kitchen. She was mechanically cutting vegetables for a salad, and I could see from her face that her mind was far away. "Hard day?" I asked, sitting down at the table. "That's an understatement," she sighed. "Jasper is completely out of control, and work was so hectic today my head is splitting. Maybe I'll make dinner? You rest." Tabitha looked at me doubtfully. "Okay," she agreed reluctantly. "Just don't use too much oil. Winton is watching his cholesterol." I made a simple dinner, baked chicken with vegetables and rice. When everyone gathered at the table, except Jasper, who refused to leave his room, the atmosphere was tense. Vinton ate silently, glancing occasionally at his wife. Rosamond picked quietly at her food. "It's delicious, Mom," Tabitha said after a few minutes of silence. "Thank you. I'm glad you like it," I replied. "Maybe we should take some to Jasper. He must be hungry. If he wants to eat, he can come down like normal people," Vinton snapped. "Vinton, don't start," Tabitha said wearily. "We've had a hard day." "Everyone's had a hard day," he grumbled. "Not everyone is acting like a spoiled child." I kept quiet, even though I wanted to say that Jasper was a child, albeit an almost grown one. Instead, I got up and started clearing the table. Reaching for Vinton's plate, I accidentally knocked his wine glass. The dark red liquid spilled onto the snow-white tablecloth and partially onto his light-colored pants. "Damn it," he jumped up. "Those are new pants!" "I'm sorry, Vinton, I didn't mean to." I grabbed a napkin and tried to blot the stain. "Don't touch it!" He pushed my hand away. "You'll only make it worse." Tabitha jumped up and pulled her husband by the arm. "Go change, I'll wash it. If you treat it right away, the stain will come out." Vinton left the table, giving me an angry look. I stood there, not knowing what to say. The hand he had pushed away tingled slightly. "I'm sorry, Mom," Tabitha said when Vinton left the room. "He's just tired. Those pants are really new. He bought them last week." "I understand. I can pay for dry cleaning or buy new ones." "No, don't worry about it," she waved me away. "I'll try to wash it." I began to gather the pieces of the broken glass, feeling clumsy and old. My hands were shaking slightly and one of the shards cut my finger. A drop of blood fell on the tablecloth, adding to the wine stain. "Be careful, Mom," Tabitha exclaimed. "Let me do it. I can handle a broken glass," I protested, feeling a wave of irritation rising inside me. "I'm not helpless." "No one said you were helpless. Just step aside, please." I stepped back, watching my daughter gather the shards with quick, efficient movements and blot the tablecloth. At that moment, it seemed to me that there was a chasm between us as wide as a lifetime. When did she become so cold and calculating? Where was the little girl who used to bring me wildflowers and climb onto my lap to listen to fairy tales? The next morning, I woke up early and decided to make pancakes, Jasper's favorite breakfast since childhood. Maybe that would help mend our family relationship? When I went down to the kitchen, Tabitha was already there. She was standing at the coffee maker, dressed for work in a strict suit. "Good morning," I said. "I thought I'd make pancakes for breakfast." "No need, Mom," she replied without turning around. "Vinton and I don't eat breakfast, and the kids are having cereal. Jasper has always loved my pancakes. Maybe it will cheer him up?" Tabitha turned to me, and the look on her face made me fall silent. She didn't just look tired, she looked exhausted. "Mom, please just let us live our lives, okay?" she said quietly, but with such bitterness that it took my breath away. "We were doing fine before you came, and we'll manage somehow." I took a step back, stunned by her words. "I just wanted to help," I mumbled. "I'm not trying to interfere." "But you are." Tabitha suddenly raised her voice. "You're always butting in with your advice, your pancakes. You're the way we did it in our day. This is my home, my family, my life." I stood there, unable to say a word. I had never seen Tabitha like this before. "I invited you to live with us because I thought it would be better for everyone," she continued, no longer holding back. "But you've become a burden. Winton doesn't know how to avoid you anymore. The children can't communicate properly because you're always around. I can't invite friends over because you show up with tea and cookies as if we were all characters in some old-fashioned TV show." Every word she said was like a blow. I felt the blood drain from my face. "If my presence is so difficult for you," I began, trying to speak calmly, "I can find another place to live." "Where would you go?" she interrupted. "You don't have a home. You don't have a job. You live off me, and you act like you're doing us a favor." "I don't live off you," I protested, feeling a wave of anger rising inside me. "I send you money every month. And I sold my house to move here because you invited me." "Those pennies don't even come close to covering your expenses," Tabitha exclaimed. "Do you know how much electricity costs, water, groceries? You sit at home all day, watching TV with the lights on in every room?" "That's not true." My voice trembled with hurt. "I've always been thrifty, and I help with the housework, with the children." "We don't need your help," Tabitha shouted. And at that moment, Vinton entered the kitchen. He stopped in the doorway, assessing the situation. "What's going on?" he asked, looking from me to his wife. "Nothing," Tabitha replied quickly. "Just a little misunderstanding." "Judging by the shouting, it's not so little," he remarked. "What's the problem?" Tabitha shot me a look full of irritation, then turned to her husband. "Mom thinks she can run our kitchen like it's her own." "I just wanted to make breakfast," I started to explain, but Vinton raised his hand to stop me. "Irma, I understand you meant well, but Tabitha and I have discussed long and hard that we have certain rules in our house." "I didn't break any rules," I protested, feeling a lump rise in my throat. "I just offered to make pancakes." "It's not about the pancakes," Tabitha snapped again. "It's about the fact that you don't respect our boundaries." "What boundaries?" I asked, not understanding what she was talking about. "I've always tried to be helpful, not get in the way." "Exactly." Tabitha clapped her hands. "You try to be helpful, but you're always interfering. You watch the children like a prison guard. You comment on our food, our habits." I never And that vase, she suddenly remembered, pointing to an empty niche in the living room where a tall Chinese vase had once stood. An expensive gift from Vinton's parents, and now it's smashed to pieces. I looked in the direction she was pointing, confused. The vase was indeed gone, but I had no idea what had happened to it. I didn't touch the vase, I said, feeling the situation spiraling out of control. I didn't even notice it was missing. Don't lie, Tabitha almost shouted. Rosamond saw you dusting that area yesterday morning. No one else went near it. I tried to remember. Yes, I had dusted the living room, but I didn't remember touching the vase or breaking anything. If I accidentally knocked it over, I didn't notice, I admitted. I'm sorry, I can replace it. Replace it? Interrupted Vinton. That vase was a family heirloom. It can't be replaced. I understand, and I'm truly sorry, but I really don't remember breaking anything. That's the problem, Tabitha exclaimed. You don't remember anything. You don't notice anything. You live in your own world, and we have to adjust to you, watch out for you. Adjust to me? My patience is wearing thin. I go out of my way not to bother you. I stay in my room so you won't see me. I only offer to help when I see you're tired. What else am I supposed to do? Get a job, Tabitha snapped. Or get your own place. Stop living off me. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. The room fell silent. I saw Vinton put his hand on Tabitha's shoulder, either to calm her down or to support her. I never wanted to be a burden, I said quietly, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. I moved here because you insisted. I sold my house, left my friends, my whole life. And now you're trying to make us feel guilty? Tabitha smiled bitterly. Typical manipulation. I looked at my daughter, the person I had raised with love, for whom I was willing to do anything, and I didn't recognize her. Standing in front of me was a stranger with cold eyes and a hard line around her mouth. I'm not manipulating you, I said, straightening up. I'm just stating a fact. I came here at your request, but if my presence makes you unhappy, I'll leave. Today. Where will you go? Tabitha asked defiantly. Back to the house that's already been sold? Or to the job you quit 3 years ago? I'll find somewhere to go, I replied with a dignity I didn't feel. Don't worry about me. I turned to leave, but Vinton blocked my way. Irma, let's not get heated, he said in a conciliatory tone. We're all tired and have said too much. Maybe we should sit down and discuss this calmly. There's nothing to discuss, I snapped. I've been made to understand that I'm not welcome here. No one said that, Tabitha interjected, suddenly embarrassed. Realizing she had gone too far, she tried to smooth things over. Mom, I'm just upset about the vase and everything else. Of course you shouldn't leave. I gave her a long look. You said I was living off you and should find a job or move out. Those were your words, Tabitha. And you know what? I agree with you. I'll find a job and my own place because I'm not going to live under the same roof with people who don't respect me anymore. With that, I walked past Vinton and headed for my room. I was shaking with hurt and anger, but I tried to stand up straight. Only when I closed the door behind me did I allow the tears to flow freely, stunned by my daughter's cruelty. I hardly slept that night. I tossed and turned in bed, replaying every word of my argument with Tabitha in my head. You're living off me. Those words burned inside me like acid. I had always been proud of my independence. Even when Quentin and I were newlyweds and barely making ends meet, I never asked my parents for help. We managed on our own. And now, in my 70s, my own daughter was accusing me of being a freeloader. Around 3 in the morning, I got up, threw on my robe, and quietly went into the kitchen. The house was silent except for the clock on the wall ticking away the seconds and the refrigerator humming softly. I made myself some tea and sat down by the window, looking out at the dark garden, vaguely visible in the light of the street lamps. Maybe Tabitha was right. Maybe I really had become a burden. I tried to be helpful, but perhaps I was only disrupting their well-ordered life. I had to face the truth. I was a stranger in this house. They had invited me out of pity or a sense of duty, not because they really wanted me there. I wrapped my hands around the cup, absorbing the warmth. Quentin always said my hands were always cold. They're ice cubes, not hands, he would joke, warming them in his big, warm palms. How I missed him. He had always been my rock, my anchor. Now I had to learn to live without him, to make decisions on my own. The first thing I needed to do was assess my financial situation. I had never been particularly practical when it came to money. Quentin had always taken care of that in our family. But now I had to pull myself together and figure things out. If I wanted to be independent, I needed to know exactly what I could count on. Over tea, I mentally tallied up my assets. We bought the house for $70,000 in the early 90s, and I sold it for almost $350,000. The real estate market had grown significantly over the years. After paying all the taxes and fees, I had about $300,000 left in my bank account, plus Quentin's insurance, another $200,000, and my pension, not that big but stable, plus his pension, part of which passed to me after his death. I thought about it. Actually, I'm not poor at all. If I manage these funds wisely, I can live independently and comfortably for many years to come. Why should I be dependent on someone else? I can afford to rent a place or even buy a small apartment. The thought brought me relief. I'm not a helpless old woman whom my daughter took in out of pity. I have money, I have strength, I have brains after all. I can start a new life, an independent life. But what about Tabitha? The bitterness of resentment still haunted me. She invited me to live with them, convinced me to sell the house, and now she's treating me like a freeloader. But that's not even the point. The most painful thing is how easily she gave up our closeness, our connection. How quickly her good intentions gave way to irritation and contempt. And then it dawned on me. Tabitha, her insistence that I sell the house, her sudden interest in my finances, Winton's questions about how I planned to spend the money. They weren't just putting up with me out of a sense of duty. They were counting on my money. Maybe not right away, but eventually, after I died. The thought made me shudder. Was my daughter really that calculating? Had she been thinking about her inheritance all this time? I didn't want to believe it, but the facts spoke for themselves. Her persistent questions about my savings, my pension, Quentin's insurance, her irritation when I tried to be independent. She wanted a submissive, obedient mother who would quietly live out her life under their roof and then leave them all her savings. The tea had long since grown cold, and I sat staring into space. I needed advice. I needed someone who understood financial and legal matters. I remembered Lorraine Pembroke, the lawyer who had handled Quentin's paperwork after his death. She had struck me as competent and, importantly, friendly. She wasn't the type to look down on elderly clients, thinking they were senile. I decided to call her in the morning and make an appointment. But I didn't want Tabitha or Vinton to know about it. They would surely start asking questions, and I wasn't ready to explain my plans yet. The morning brought new resolve. I got dressed as usual, trying not to make any noise so as not to wake the household. I decided to skip breakfast. I didn't want to face Tabitha or Vinton after yesterday's argument. Instead, I left a note saying I was going for a walk and quietly left the house. The day was cool but sunny. Autumn in Sherville was beautiful. The trees were ablaze with gold and crimson, and the air was fresh and clear. I walked along familiar streets, past neat houses with well-kept lawns, and thought about my future. For the first time in a long time, I felt something like excitement. Yesterday, I was crushed by resentment, but today I felt a strange, almost forgotten sense of freedom. I can change everything. I can start with a clean slate. I stopped at a small cafe on the corner to have a coffee and call Lorraine. Her secretary said that Miss Pembroke had a busy schedule, but she could see me tomorrow at 10 in the morning if it was urgent. I confirmed that I would come and felt a rush of excitement building inside me. This was the first step towards my new life. After the cafe, I went to the bank. I needed to know exactly how much money I had in my account and what options I had for using it. The young bank clerk was polite and patient. He showed me my account statement and told me about the various investment products the bank offered. You could put some of your money in a higher interest deposit account, he suggested, or consider our conservative investment portfolios. They offer a higher return than a regular account, but with minimal risk. I listened carefully, but decided not to make any decisions yet. I needed to consult with Lorraine first. However, I asked the bank clerk to prepare information about the various options so I could review them at home. One more question, I said before leaving. Can I be sure that no one else will have access to my account information? Of course, Mrs. Bloodgood, he replied. Banking secrecy is strictly protected by law. No one but you has access to your account information. That was reassuring. I didn't want Tabitha or Vinton to know about my financial affairs. Leaving the bank, I decided to continue my research mission. I needed to find a place to live. I didn't know how expensive rent was in Sherville, but I decided to start looking right away. At a newsstand, I bought a local newspaper with real estate listings. Sitting down on a bench in a small park, I began to look through the options. The rents were higher than I had expected, but still quite affordable for me. I marked a few listings with a pen. I would have to call and find out more details. By evening, I was back home. As expected, I was greeted with a cold reception. Tabitha nodded briefly when I entered the living room, and Vinton pretended to be completely absorbed in the television. Only Rosamond ran up to hug me. "Grandma, where were you? I was worried," she said, clinging to me. "Just out for a walk, sweetie, exploring the city," I replied, stroking her head. "How was your day?" "Fine. I got a lot of homework at school. Can you help me with history?" "Sure, I'll help you. Just let me change first." I headed to my room, feeling Tabitha's gaze on me. She didn't say anything, but I could tell she was surprised by my long absence and the fact that I had returned in such a good mood. In my room, I carefully folded the newspapers and notes and put them in my desk drawer. I didn't want anyone to accidentally see them and start asking questions. Then I changed into my house clothes and went back to the living room to help Rosamond with her homework. Dinner was tense and silent. Tabitha had made lasagna, and it was delicious, but the atmosphere at the table ruined it. Jasper picked at his food sullenly, Vinton was buried in his phone, and Tabitha responded in monosyllables when I tried to strike up a conversation. Only Rosamond chattered about school news, oblivious to or ignoring the tension between the adults. After dinner, I helped clear the table and wash the dishes, despite Tabitha's attempts to keep me from doing so. I wanted to show that I didn't hold a grudge, even though deep down I was still hurt by her words. The next morning, I left early again, leaving a note that I had a meeting with a friend. It wasn't exactly a lie. Lorraine could be considered my friend, even though we weren't close. Lorraine Pembroke's office was located in a small but elegant building in the business district. The secretary, a young man with a neat beard, showed me into the office where Lorraine was waiting for me. She hadn't changed much since our last meeting, still the same fit middle-aged woman with short gray hair and a piercing gaze. She stood up to greet me and shook my hand firmly. "Mrs. Bloodgood, it's good to see you again," she said, pointing to a chair across from her desk. "How have you been?" "Just call me Irma," I smiled. "I'm going through some changes, let's say." "Sounds intriguing." Lorraine sat back down at her desk. "How can I help you?" I took a deep breath and began to tell her everything. About moving in with Tabitha, about the gradual deterioration of our relationship, about yesterday's argument, about my suspicions regarding my daughter's true motives, about my desire to start a new, independent life. Lorraine listened attentively, occasionally taking notes in her notebook. When I finished, she tapped her pen thoughtfully on the table. "So, if I understand correctly, you want to change your will?" "Yes," I nodded. "But not only that. I need advice on a whole range of issues. How best to manage my finances to ensure a comfortable and independent life? What are my options for housing? And yes, I want to change my will so that Tabitha doesn't get all my money after I die." "I see." Lorraine made another note. "Let's take it one step at a time. Let's start with your finances. You said you have money from the sale of your house, your husband's insurance, and your pension. Is that correct?" "Yes. About $500,000 in total, plus my pension." "Hey, that's a good amount, Irma. With proper management, it can provide you with a comfortable life for many years to come. I would recommend putting some of the money into conservative, low-risk investments, leaving some in a high-yield savings account for unexpected expenses, and using the rest to buy or rent a home depending on what you prefer." "What would you recommend, buying or renting?" "It depends on many factors." Lorraine leaned back in her chair. "Buying has its advantages. You become the owner, and real estate usually increases in value over time. But there are also disadvantages. responsibility for repairs and maintenance, property taxes. Renting is a more flexible option, but it can be more expensive in the long run. I thought about it. I didn't want to get involved with property again, with all the worries and hassle. At the same time, I didn't want to throw money away on rent. Maybe there's a middle ground? I asked. You could consider a senior living community, Lorraine suggested. Not a nursing home, but a community with independent living. You can buy or rent an apartment there, but you have access to various services, cleaning, maintenance, and sometimes medical care. Many of my clients your age choose this option. That sounds interesting, I admitted, but I'm not sure I'm ready to live among other elderly people. I don't feel old, you know? Lorraine smiled. I understand. Then perhaps a small apartment or townhouse in a nice neighborhood. There are several decent options in Sherville. I can recommend a reliable real estate agent. I'd appreciate that. Now about your will. Lorraine opened the folder in front of her. I have a copy of your current will. According to it, all your property will be divided equally between your children, Tabitha and Fletcher, upon your death. Is that correct? Yes. Quentin and I made mutual wills. All property was to go to the surviving spouse, and after his death, to the children in equal shares. And how do you want to change that distribution? I was silent for a moment, gathering my thoughts. I didn't want to act out of a sense of revenge, but at the same time, I thought it was unfair for Tabitha to get half of my fortune after the way she had treated me. I want most of my money to go to charity, I finally said. To the local library, where I often went with Quentin, and to Alzheimer's research. My mother died of that disease. I want to leave my children $25,000 each, no more, and $30,000 to my grandchildren, but on the condition that they can only receive the money when they turn 25, for their education or to buy their first home. Lorraine nodded as she wrote down my wishes. That's a very reasonable distribution, Irma. I'll prepare a draft of your new will within a week. We'll meet to discuss the details and then have it drawn up officially, with notarization and witnesses. Thank you, Lorraine. One more question. Is there any way Tabitha could find out that I've changed my will? No, unless you tell her yourself. A will is a confidential document. Only you, I, as your lawyer, and the notary will know its contents. Leaving Lorraine's office, I felt an unprecedented lightness. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just going with the flow. I was taking action, making decisions, taking control of my life. On the way home, I stopped by the real estate agency that Lorraine had recommended and made appointments to see a few apartments the following week. When I got home, I found that no one was there. Tabitha was at work, Vinton was at work, and the kids were at school. I was glad about that. I didn't have to make up excuses for where I had been. I went to my room and started making a plan. First, I had to figure out where to live. After viewing the apartments, I would choose the most suitable option and sign a lease. Second, work. I decided to call the antique shop where I had seen a job opening and set up an interview. Third, banking. I needed to open several accounts as Lorraine had recommended and allocate my funds in the best way possible. I worked on my plan all day, making calls, writing down ideas, and making lists of things I needed. By evening, when my family started coming home, I already had a clear plan of action for the coming weeks. A plan that none of them were to know about until everything was ready. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. During the day, when Tabitha and Vinton were at work and the children were at school, I was busy preparing for the move. I looked at apartments, met with Lorraine to sign the new will, and went to an interview at an antique store. In the evenings, I returned to my daughter's house and played the role of a submissive mother who had come to terms with her situation. I found an apartment quickly, small but bright, in an old brick building on a quiet street in the eastern part of Sherville. 2 stories, 2 bedrooms, a living room with high ceilings and wooden floors that creaked pleasantly underfoot. A small kitchen with a window overlooking a well-kept courtyard, and most importantly, complete independence. No reproaches, no cold stares, no need to constantly apologize for my existence. The rent was reasonable, especially considering my financial situation. I signed a 1-year lease with an option to renew and paid a deposit. The landlord, an elderly gentleman named Archibald Wells, seemed like a nice man. He lived in the house next door and, as I understood from our conversation, was renting out the apartment not so much for the money as to keep it from standing empty. My daughter lived here until she got married and moved to California, he said, handing me the keys. I could have sold the place, but I have too many memories here. I'm glad someone who will appreciate its atmosphere will be living here. I like that story. There was something symbolic about starting my new life in a place filled with someone else's happy memories. I also found a job without much difficulty. The owner of the antique shop Legacy of the Past, Mr. Dobson, turned out to be an experienced collector and a true enthusiast of his craft. When I came in for an interview and told him about my love for antiques, which Quentin and I had shared all our lives, he lit up. You see, Mrs. Bloodgood, most of the candidates for this position are young people who are just looking for a job. They don't care whether they're selling antiques or hamburgers, he said, adjusting his thin-rimmed glasses. I need someone who really appreciates the history of things and can tell customers about them. We talked for almost an hour, discussing different eras and styles and sharing stories about our favorite finds. At the end of the conversation, Mr. Dobson offered me a position as a consultant with a flexible schedule, 3 days a week, 5 hours a day. It was perfect, enough to keep me busy and earn some extra income, but not so much that I would feel tired. When can you start? He asked. In 2 weeks, if that works for you, I replied. I need to take care of some personal matters. He agreed to wait, and we agreed that I would start on November 15th. The new will was signed, notarized, and given to Lorraine for safekeeping. She also helped me open new bank accounts and allocate my funds in the best way possible. Some for living expenses, some in a high-yield deposit account, and some in conservative investments. Now I was sure I could live comfortably and independently for many years to come. The hardest part remained: the move itself. I didn't want to make a scene, explain myself, listen to objections, or even worse, fake apologies and pleas to stay. I decided to leave quietly, leaving only a letter behind. I chose the day carefully. Tabitha and Vinton were planning to spend the weekend with friends in a neighboring town, taking the children with them. This gave me almost 48 hours to pack my things, move them to my new place, and settle in. When the day came, I felt a strange calmness, no nervousness, no doubts, only a firm conviction that I was doing the right thing. I walked my family to the car, waved goodbye, and then returned to the house and began packing. I didn't have many things: clothes, a few books, photographs, and some memorable souvenirs. The most valuable items were a mahogany chest of drawers and a rocking chair that I had brought from our old house. I had arranged for a transport company to move them in advance. By Friday evening, everything was ready. My belongings were already waiting for me in my new apartment, and the room where I had lived for the past few months was empty. I left an envelope with a letter for Tabitha and a separate envelope for my grandchildren with my new address on the table in the living room. I didn't want to completely sever ties with them. I kept the letter short. Dear Tabitha, I have decided to start a new life on my own. I have a place to live and a job, so your concerns about me living off you are no longer relevant. I am grateful to you for taking me in during a difficult time, but now we will both be better off living apart. Please do not try to find me. I will contact you myself when I'm ready to talk. I left my address with the children, and they can visit me if they want to. With love, Mom. As I left the house, I felt neither malice nor satisfaction at the thought of how surprised and possibly upset Tabitha would be. Only relief and quiet joy at the prospect of a new chapter in my life. The first night in my new apartment was strange. Unfamiliar sounds, smells, sensations. I couldn't fall asleep for a long time, listening to the ticking of the old wall clock that came with the apartment, the rustling of leaves outside the window, the distant honking of a train. But it was a good kind of sleeplessness, full of hopes and plans, not worries and resentment. In the morning, I woke up with a feeling of freedom that I hadn't felt in a very long time. No one would criticize my choice of clothes, no one would roll their eyes when I offered to help, no one would pretend to tolerate my presence out of kindness. I could eat breakfast when I wanted, watch what I wanted on TV, come and go without having to explain myself to anyone. I spent the next few days settling into my apartment. I bought new curtains, bedding, and dishes. I arranged my books and hung up my photos. Gradually, the faceless space became a home, my home. I turned off my phone immediately after moving. I didn't want to hear angry or accusatory calls from Tabitha. I didn't want to explain myself. I knew she would call, and I knew I wasn't ready for that conversation. I would let time pass and my emotions settle. My calculation proved to be correct. On Monday, the day after my family returned, my new neighbor, Mr. Wells, informed me that a woman had been asking about me. She was quite persistent, he said, handing me some freshly baked scones as a neighborly greeting. She said she was looking for her mother. I didn't say anything. You didn't mention you were expecting guests. Thank you, Mr. Wells, I said. She's my daughter. We have a complicated relationship, and I'm not ready to see her yet. I understand, he nodded. Family matters can be complicated. My advice is to give it time. It doesn't heal all wounds, but it heals many. I was grateful for his tact and wisdom, and for not asking for details. A couple of days later, I got a call from Muriel, Tabitha's former colleague, whom I sometimes met for coffee. I had given her my new number before I left, but I didn't expect a call so soon. Irma, are you okay? She asked without preamble. Tabitha has everyone on edge looking for you. I'm fine, Muriel, I assured her. I just decided to start a new life. I rented an apartment and found a job. She says you disappeared without warning and she's worried. I left a letter, I sighed. And she's not worried about me. She's worried about the money she was counting on getting after my death. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Oh, Irma, that's a serious accusation. I know. And believe me, I don't throw words around lightly. I had my reasons for thinking and acting the way I did. Muriel paused, then said, She asked if I knew where you were. I said I didn't. It's true, you didn't give me your address. But she asked me to tell you that she needs to talk to you urgently. Something to do with documents. What documents? I don't know. She didn't say, but she seemed very upset. It got me thinking. Tabitha must have found out about my visit to Lorraine and guessed that I changed the will. No wonder she's panicking. Thanks for letting me know, Muriel, but I'm not ready to talk to her yet. I need some time. I understand. I won't pressure you. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. I'm more than okay, I smiled, looking around my cozy living room. For the first time in a long time, I feel like myself. After that conversation, I decided not to answer the phone if the number was unfamiliar. Tabitha would surely try to reach me through other people, and I didn't want to be unexpectedly drawn into a conversation I wasn't ready for. The following Wednesday, I started working at the antique shop. Mr. Dobson gave me a brief orientation, showed me how the cash register worked, and told me about prices and discounts. Then he gave me relative freedom to advise customers, help them choose items, and share stories about the antiques. The job turned out to be exactly what I had hoped for. Interesting, not too tiring, and giving me the opportunity to interact with people who shared my love of history and beautiful things. I quickly settled in, and by the end of the first week, I felt right at home. One day, an elegant middle-aged woman came into the shop. She spent a long time looking at the collection of antique brooches, then turned to me for advice. I'm looking for a gift for my mother, she explained. It's her birthday in a week. She's turning 70. I helped her choose a beautiful cameo in a silver setting, and while I was wrapping her purchase, we got talking. Have you been working here long? She asked. I haven't seen you before. Yes, just a few days, I confirmed. Starting a new life, so to speak. That's brave, she smiled. Many people are afraid of change, especially at a certain age. It's never too late to start over, I replied, handing her the neatly wrapped box. I hope your mom likes the gift. I'm sure she will, she nodded. Thanks for your help, and good luck in your new life. For some reason, this short conversation gave me even more confidence. Yes, I did the right thing. Yes, I'm on the right track. In the evenings, I often walked around the neighborhood, getting to know my new area. I discovered a cozy cafe with delicious cakes, a small library where I could read the latest magazines, and a picturesque park with a pond where ducks swam. Gradually, new habits, new routes, and a new rhythm of life took shape. On Saturday, when I was returning from the grocery store, laden with bags, I saw Rosamond at my door. She was sitting on the steps, hugging her knees, and looked very young and vulnerable. "Grandma!" she exclaimed when she saw me and rushed toward me. I hugged her tightly, as much as the grocery bags would allow. "Rosamond, sweetheart, how did you find me?" "You left us your address," she replied, helping me with the bags. "I told Mom I was going to a friend's house to study." "You lied?" I frowned. "A little," she said, embarrassed. "It's just that Mom, she's very angry. She says you were selfish. But I wanted to see you, to make sure you were okay." We went up to the apartment and I showed my granddaughter my new home. She looked around each room with curiosity, touching things and looking at photos. "It's so cozy," she said finally. "And it's not like our house at all." "What do you mean?" I asked, putting the kettle on. "Well, ours is so modern, functional. But here you can feel the history, the character. It's as if everything has a meaning." I smiled. This girl understood me better than her mother ever had. "That's right, sweetheart. Everything here has a story." We sat down at the table and I treated Rosamond to tea and cookies I had baked the day before. She told me about school, her friends, and the new book she was reading. Then, after a pause, she asked, "Grandma, are you really not coming back to live with us?" I sighed. "No, dear. I'm better off living on my own, but you can come visit me whenever you want. And Jasper, too, if he wants to." "He won't come." Rosamond shook her head. "He thinks you betrayed the family. He always agrees with Mom." "And you don't agree?" "I just want everyone to be happy," she replied with a wisdom beyond her years. "And if you're happier here, then I'm happy for you." I hugged her, feeling a lump rise in my throat. This little girl was the only person in the family who truly cared about my feelings rather than her own interests. "Mom's trying to find you," Rosamond said when we let go of each other. "She's been calling everyone, even went to your lawyer." "Lorraine?" I asked, surprised. "Yes, I think that's her name. But that woman didn't tell my mom anything. She said it was confidential information." I mentally thanked Lorraine for her professionalism. She could have easily given out my address, but she had followed her ethics and kept my secret. "Mom is very upset," Rosamond continued. "She says you changed your will and disinherited us. Is that true?" I looked at my granddaughter, not knowing what to say. I didn't want to involve her in adult problems, but I didn't want to lie either. "The truth is, I've decided to dispose of my money as I see fit," I said finally. "And I don't have to answer to your mother for my decisions." Rosamond nodded, accepting my answer. We talked a little longer. Then I walked her to the bus stop, promising to be careful and call me if she needed anything. As I watched the bus drive away, I thought about how strange everything had turned out. Tabitha, my own daughter, saw me as nothing more than a source of potential income, while Rosamond, still almost a child, was capable of genuine, selfless love. Well, at least I knew that all was not lost. Somewhere in this family there was still something alive that Quentin and I had tried to teach them. When I got home, I found 3 messages on my answering machine, all from Tabitha, and each time her voice sounded more and more irritated. "Mom, this is Tabitha. Please call me back. We need to talk." "Mom, I know you're getting these messages. Stop playing hide and seek and call me." "Mom, this isn't funny anymore. I found out you were at Lorraine Pembroke's. What are you up to? We're a family. We should discuss these things together." I deleted all the messages without the slightest desire to call back. Family? When was the last time Tabitha had behaved like a loving daughter? When was the last time she had thought about my feelings instead of her own? No, I wasn't ready for this conversation. Not yet. First, I needed to get settled in my new place, get used to my new job, and feel confident in my new life. And Tabitha could wait. After all, she had her whole life ahead of her to learn to value people, not their money. A month had passed since I started my new life. November turned to December, and Sherville was transformed for the holidays. The streets were decorated with garlands, Christmas displays appeared in shop windows, and the air was filled with the scent of cinnamon, cloves, and pine needles. I had completely settled into my new routine. 3 days a week, I worked at the antique shop, and in my free time, I explored the city, went to the library, and attended a small knitting club I had discovered nearby. Rosamond came to see me every Saturday. We baked cookies, watched old movies, and talked. Sometimes she stayed overnight, and those evenings were the happiest of my life. Jasper, as Rosamond had predicted, never showed up. Apparently, solidarity with his mother was more important to him. I didn't blame him. Teenagers often take the side of the parent they live with, especially if that parent actively turns them against the other. Tabitha continued to call and leave messages, but I didn't call back. I knew the conversation was inevitable, but I wanted to wait until I was emotionally ready for it. Besides, the more time passed, the clearer it became to me that I didn't owe anyone any explanations. It was my life, my decisions, my money. Muriel told me that Tabitha had been asking all our mutual acquaintances about me, trying to find out where I lived and worked. Fortunately, no one except Rosamond knew my address, and I was sure that my granddaughter wouldn't give me away. Still, the meeting was inevitable. In a small town like Sherville, it's impossible to avoid someone who is actively looking for you for long. I knew this and was preparing myself for a confrontation. It happened in the most mundane place, at the Kroger supermarket in the city center. I was picking out fruit for a fruit salad when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "There you are." I turned around and saw Tabitha. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes and new wrinkles at the corners of her mouth. Her light hair, usually neatly styled, was now casually pulled back into a ponytail. She looked at me with an expression that was a mixture of relief and irritation. "Hi, Tabitha," I said calmly, placing an apple in my basket. "Hello? Is that all you can say after a month of silence?" Her voice trembled with barely contained anger. "I looked everywhere for you, called all my friends, left messages." "I know," I nodded, and I decided not to answer until I was ready to talk. "Ready to talk?" She raised her voice and several shoppers turned to look at us. "You disappeared without warning, leaving only a note, not answering my calls. I thought something had happened to you." I looked at her skeptically. "Really? You were worried about me, not my money?" Tabitha paled. "How can you say that? I'm your daughter." "The daughter who accused me of living off her and practically kicked me out of the house," I reminded her. "I overreacted," she protested. "I was stressed, tired after work. You know how it is. You can't take every word so literally." I sighed. It was always the same. First the insults and humiliation, then the excuses. "I didn't mean it. You misunderstood. I'm just tired." And then it all started over again. "Let's not make a scene in the middle of the store," I said. "If you want to talk, we can meet at a cafe." "Okay," Tabitha calmed down a little. "There's a Starbucks nearby in 15 minutes?" "That's fine," I agreed. She turned and quickly walked to the exit without saying goodbye. I finished my shopping, paid, and headed to the cafe. Part of me wanted to just go home and avoid the conversation, but I knew that wouldn't solve the problem. Sooner or later we would have to talk, and it was better to do it on neutral ground than at my house. When I walked into Starbucks, Tabitha was already sitting at a table by the window with 2 cups of coffee. I noticed this little manipulation. She ordered my coffee without asking what I wanted, showing that she knew better than I did. Typical Tabitha. I sat down across from her and put my shopping bags on the floor. "I got you an Americano," she said. "You like it?" "Thanks," I replied, even though I would have preferred tea. But now was not the time to argue over trifles. We sat in silence for a while. Tabitha fidgeted with her cup, and I looked out the window at the people passing by. Finally, she spoke. "Mom, I don't understand why you did this. We're a family. We're supposed to be together, to support each other." "Family isn't just about rights, it's about responsibilities," I replied. "It's not just you have to be with me, it's I will respect you and your decisions." "I didn't feel that respect in your house." "You're exaggerating," she exclaimed. "Yes, I was harsh at times, but you know how stressful my job is, how many problems I have with the children." "I know everyone has problems, Tabitha, but not everyone uses them as an excuse to treat their loved ones badly." She took a sip of coffee, clearly trying to collect her thoughts. "Okay, I admit I've gone too far sometimes. But that's no reason to disappear without a word. Do you have any idea what I went through? I thought you'd been kidnapped, or in an accident, or—" "I left a note," I reminded her. "And you knew perfectly well that I was fine. Rosamond visits me every week." Tabitha's eyes widened. "Rosamond? She knows where you live? Of course. I left her and Jasper my address. And she didn't tell me, Tabitha exclaimed indignantly. She's been lying to me all this time. She was protecting my privacy, I replied calmly, and I'm grateful to her for that. She understands that adults can have complicated relationships that need to be respected. Tabitha shook her head. I can't believe it. My own daughter behind your back. Not behind my back, with my permission, I interrupted her. And let's not involve the children in our problems. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms over her chest. Okay, so what now? You moved, found a job? Where do you work, by the way? At an antique store, I replied, seeing no point in hiding that information. 3 days a week. At an antique store, she repeated with a hint of disdain. In 61? Isn't that a bit tedious? Not at all. I like the work, and Mr. Dobson is very pleased with me. And yet, Tabitha leaned forward, wouldn't it have been better to just talk to me? Explain what was bothering you? We could have worked it out. You could have stayed with us, in comfort, among loved ones. I feel comfortable where I am respected, I said firmly. And I'm glad I made this decision. For the first time in a long time, I feel free and happy. Tabitha pursed her lips. Happy, alone, in a strange neighborhood, working for some junk dealer? Don't you dare talk about my job like that, I warned. Mr. Dobson is an educated man with excellent taste and a wealth of knowledge, and I'm not alone. I have new friends, neighbors, colleagues, and Rosamond visits me. New friends, Tabitha snorted. At your age? It was another attempt to make me feel old and helpless, but this time I didn't give in. Yes, imagine that. People make friends at any age. And my age, by the way, is none of your business. I could see her struggling with her irritation. Clearly, this wasn't the conversation she'd expected. She thought I would make excuses, apologize, but instead she was met with calm confidence in my position. Okay, Mom, she said finally, clearly changing tactics. I understand that you want your independence, and I respect that, but we're still a family. I want you back in our lives. The children miss you. Rosamond sees me every week, I reminded her. And Jasper could visit me if he wanted to. I never stopped him from doing that. You know how proud he is, Tabitha sighed. He's hurt that you left without saying goodbye. I left a letter, I said again, and an address for both of you. If he wants to see me, I'd be happy to see him. Tabitha was silent, twirling the nearly empty cup in her hands. Then, as if making up her mind, she looked up at me. Mom, I heard you were at Lorraine Pembroke's. Is that true? There it was. The main reason she had been looking for me so insistently. Not concern for my well-being, but fear for her inheritance. Yes, I consulted with Lorraine on a few legal matters, I replied neutrally. What kind of matters? Tabitha no longer hid the tension in her voice. Personal, I replied. That concern only me. Mom, if it's about the will, it concerns the whole family, she insisted. We should discuss these things together. No, Tabitha, we don't, I said firmly. My will is my own business. I can dispose of my money as I see fit. So you really did change your will, she narrowed her eyes. Because of one argument? Because of a few careless words spoken in anger? That's petty and unfair. It's not about one argument, I shook my head. It's about the overall attitude, the way you've treated me all these months, the way you looked at me, not as a person with feelings and dignity, but as a burden to be endured for future gain. That's not true, she exclaimed. I invited you to live with us because I was worried about you, because I didn't want you to be alone after your father died. You insisted that I sell the house, I reminded her. You asked about my finances, my pension, my insurance. Vinton offered to help with investments. You both seem more interested in my money than in my well-being. Tabitha turned pale. Are you accusing us of greed? Of wanting your money? I'm stating facts, I shrugged. You can interpret them however you like. She jumped up, nearly knocking over the table. How could you? I'm your daughter. I took care of you, gave you a roof over your head, and you accuse me of such terrible things. Several visitors turned at her cry. I remained calm. Please sit down, Tabitha. You're attracting attention. She reluctantly sat down, glaring at me. So you've disinherited us, she hissed. That's a wonderful way to repay us for everything we've done for you. I'm not obligated to leave you an inheritance just because you're my daughter, I replied calmly. An inheritance is not a right, it's a privilege, and I decide who deserves it. What about the children? A pleading note crept into her voice. You've disinherited your grandchildren too? What have they done to deserve this? I won't discuss the details of my will, Tabitha. That's my business. But I can assure you that I am taking care of Rosamond and Jasper's future. That's not fair, she exclaimed. You can't just take away years of family ties because of one argument. I'll say it again. This isn't about one argument. And it's not about money. It's about respect. It's about how you've treated me all this time. I didn't feel like a loved mother in your house. I felt like an unwanted burden. You're exaggerating, she shook her head. Yes, I've been harsh, but that's no reason to take such drastic measures. It is for me, I said firmly. And my decision is final. I'm not going to change it. Tabitha looked at me with undisguised anger. You'll regret this, she hissed. I'll contest the will. I'll prove you were incompetent when you signed it. I smiled. Good luck with that. Lorraine made sure everything was legally watertight. My mental health has been confirmed by a medical report, and the will was signed in the presence of independent witnesses. It was a bluff. I hadn't undergone any medical examination. But Tabitha couldn't know that, and I saw her confidence waver. You can't do this to us, she said, her voice quieter. We're family. Family isn't just blood, Tabitha. It's mutual respect, care, and support. I haven't felt that from you. And until I do, our relationship will remain formal. What do you mean? I mean, you can see me if you want. We can talk. But I'm not coming back to your house and pretending everything is fine when it's not. Tabitha was silent, digesting my words. I could see anger, hurt, and confusion fighting in her eyes. She clearly hadn't expected such firmness from me. What do I need to do to change your mind? She finally asked. About the will? Nothing. That decision is final, I replied. About our relationship. Time will tell. If you really want to reconnect, start by learning to respect my decisions and my independence. And you expect me to just accept that? Her voice was tinged with irritation again. I don't expect anything, Tabitha. I'm just telling you how it is. It's up to you to decide how to respond. I finished my coffee and put the cup on the table. I have to go. I still have things to do. Wait, she grabbed my arm. Will you at least tell me where you live? So I can visit you? I shook my head. Not yet. I'll contact you when I'm ready. In the meantime, if you need to tell me anything, you can let Rosamond know. That's ridiculous, she exclaimed. I have to use my own daughter as a messenger to get in touch with my mother? It's your choice, I shrugged. You can respect my desire to keep my distance or continue to pressure me. In the latter case, we'll only be able to communicate through lawyers. Are you threatening me with a lawsuit? Her eyes widened. No, I'm just saying that if you continue to stalk me or try to control my life, I'll have to take legal action to protect my privacy. I hope it doesn't come to that. I got up and picked up my shopping bags. Goodbye, Tabitha. Say hello to Vinton and the kids. You can't just leave, she exclaimed. We're not finished talking. The conversation is over for me, I said firmly. I've said everything I wanted to say. The rest is up to you. With that, I left the cafe, feeling her gaze burning into my back. Outside, I took a deep breath of the cold December air. The conversation had been difficult, but I didn't regret it. For the first time in my life, I had firmly defended my boundaries, resisted manipulation, and not allowed guilt to get the better of me. I walked home, and with every step, the weight inside me grew lighter. I did what I had to do. I said what I had to say. Now it was up to Tabitha, whether she could accept the new reality or continue to fight. I was ready for either outcome. No one else would decide how I should live my life. This thought filled me with a calm confidence and a sense of freedom that I hadn't felt in a very long time. Time flies when life is full of meaning. 6 months passed in a flash. Winter gave way to spring and spring to early summer. Sherville was transformed. Trees were covered with fresh foliage, tulips and daffodils bloomed in the parks, followed by peonies and roses. My life has also been transformed, blossomed, and filled with new colors. Working at the antique store Legacy of the Past has become not just a way to earn a living, but a real pleasure. Mr. Dobson, seeing my enthusiasm and knowledge, entrusted me with evaluating new arrivals and communicating with regular customers. I started a small notebook in which I wrote down the stories of particularly interesting items. A Victorian brooch with a secret compartment for a lock of a lover's hair, a tea set that once belonged to a French aristocratic family, a collection of antique needle cases in the shape of fruits and vegetables. These stories helped sell the items. Buyers love to take home not just a beautiful object, but a piece of history associated with it. In April, I signed up for photography classes at a local community center. Quentin had always been interested in photography and taught me the basics, but I never found the time to pursue it. Now that I had control over my own time, I decided to make up for lost time. The course was taught by a young but very talented photographer named Nate Harmon. He patiently explained the principles of composition, working with light and camera settings to our group of 12 people of different ages. To my surprise, I turned out to be a capable student. Nate often praised my work for its unusual angles and attention to detail. In this class, I met Eleanor Fisher, a woman about my age who, like me, was a widow. She worked as a librarian at the city library and was passionate about nature photography. We quickly hit it off and began seeing each other outside of class. Sometimes we would go to a cafe after class. Sometimes we would arrange photo shoots in the park or the botanical garden. Eleanor introduced me to her friends, who were also active retirees with no intention of spending the rest of their lives in a rocking chair in front of the TV. That's how our little club was formed. Me, Eleanor, Howard Payne, a former literature professor with a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue, and Martha King, a former nurse who started learning Spanish at the age of 65 and dreamed of going to Barcelona. We met once a week at a small cafe called Emma's, where we discussed books, movies, the news, shared stories from our lives, and made plans for the future. With them, I felt understood and accepted. No one thought it was strange that I was starting a new life at my age. No one accused me of being selfish or irresponsible. My relationship with my family developed in different ways. Rosamond still came every Saturday, and these meetings were a breath of fresh air for me. She told me about school, her friends, and her dreams of becoming an artist. I encouraged her passion for art. I bought her high-quality paints and brushes, took her to exhibitions, and showed her albums of works by great masters that I borrowed from the library. Sometimes we painted together. I was never particularly talented, but Rosamond liked that I shared her interest. To my surprise, Jasper also started visiting me, though not as regularly as his sister. He came for the first time in March, unexpectedly and without warning. He stood in the doorway, tall and angular, with a wary look, more like his father than Tabitha. "Hi, Grandma," he said, not looking me in the eye. "Can I come in?" I silently hugged him and led him into the living room. The first half hour was awkward. He answered in monosyllables, looking around, clearly not knowing why he had come. But then when I showed him my small collection of antique pocket watches, one of the advantages of working in an antique shop is the opportunity to find such treasures, he perked up. It turned out that Jasper was fascinated by mechanisms and had even considered a career as an engineer. "Look how finely engraved it is," he said, examining the silver case of a mid-19th century watch. "And the mechanism still works?" "Yes, Mr. Dobson had it checked by a watchmaker before selling it. It keeps perfect time. It just needs to be wound every 24 hours. After that, the ice was broken. Jasper started coming by every 2 or 3 weeks, usually on Sundays. We didn't talk about Tabitha or the past. He seemed to have made a tacit decision to stay out of the conflict between his mother and grandmother. And that was fine with me. Things were more complicated with Tabitha. After our meeting at the cafe, she called several more times, leaving messages with apologies, requests to meet, and sometimes threats. I didn't call her back. Not because I held a grudge, but because I saw no point in conversations that would lead nowhere. Tabitha didn't understand, or didn't want to understand, that it wasn't about the argument or the money, but about the fundamental disrespect she showed me. Through Rosamond, I learned that Tabitha and Vinton were going through a rough patch. Vinton had lost his job due to downsizing and had been unable to find a new one for several months. This had created financial strain on the family, and they had even considered selling their house. Perhaps that was why Tabitha was so insistent on restoring our relationship. She was hoping for financial assistance. I wasn't gloating, but I wasn't rushing to help either. I knew they had savings, that Tabitha earned good money, and that they would manage. And they did manage. By May, Vinton had found a new job, albeit with a lower salary, but enough to maintain their lifestyle with some cutbacks. At the end of May, something I had been waiting for happened. I received a postcard from Fletcher, my son. He lived in Oregon, worked in landscape design, and had his own small firm. We hadn't seen each other in 3 years, since he came to Quentin's funeral. We spoke on the phone occasionally, but we weren't particularly close. Fletcher had always been independent, self-sufficient, and didn't need constant support or advice. In his postcard with a view of Portland, he wrote that he was planning a business trip to the East Coast in July and would like to stop by to see me. Tabitha told me about your differences, he wrote. I'm not going to get involved or take sides. I just want to see you, Mom. I miss you. This short note filled me with joy and excitement. I immediately wrote back, giving him my new address and phone number and inviting him to stay with me. The second bedroom in my apartment, which I had furnished as a guest room, would finally come in handy. June was hot and sunny. I continued working at the antique shop, but reduced my hours to 2 days a week. The summer heat was exhausting, and I wanted to spend more time outdoors. Mr. Dobson was understanding about my request. There were fewer visitors in the summer, and he could handle the workload himself. I devoted my free time to photography. My hobby had grown into a real passion. I bought a good digital camera and spent hours looking for interesting shots. Dewdrops on flower petals, the play of light and shadow in the park, reflections in the windows of old buildings. Nate, our teacher, invited me to participate in a small exhibition of his students' work, which was planned for August at the community center. I accepted with excitement and trepidation. My creative work had never been displayed in public before. Gardening became another new hobby. My landlord, Mr. Wells, allowed me to set up a small flower garden in the courtyard. I planted roses, lavender, mint, and basil. Caring for the plants, watching them grow and bloom, was truly therapeutic for the soul. Sometimes Mr. Wells and I would drink tea together in the shade of an old apple tree growing in the middle of the courtyard and discuss plans for further improvements to the grounds. One day in mid-June, as we sat in the courtyard enjoying the evening coolness after a hot day, he suddenly asked, "Irma, have you ever thought about buying this apartment?" I looked at him in surprise. "Buy it? But you're not selling it." "I haven't sold it yet," he nodded. "But I'm getting older, and it's getting harder to maintain 2 houses. I'm thinking about moving to Arizona to be with my sister. The climate is better for my arthritis." I thought about it. The idea of buying the apartment I already considered my home was tempting. I had grown accustomed to this place and had come to love it. Besides, it would be a good investment. "I'd like to think about it," I said. "What do you think is a fair price?" We discussed the possible terms of the deal, and I promised to give him an answer in a week, after consulting with Lorraine. The idea of becoming a full-fledged homeowner, rather than just a tenant, excited me. It would be another step toward complete independence. At the end of June, when I returned from work, an envelope with the logo of the law firm Bryant and Partners was waiting for me. Inside was a formal letter from a lawyer representing Tabitha Harlow. In dry legal terms, he demanded information about my new will, threatening legal action if I refused. I read the letter twice, feeling a wave of irritation rising inside me. Tabitha had not given up trying to control my life and my decisions. Even after 6 months, she still couldn't accept that I had the right to dispose of my property as I saw fit. I crumpled up the letter and threw it in the trash. Then I took out my phone and called Lorraine. "Lorraine, this is Irma Bloodgood. I received a letter from Tabitha's lawyer demanding that I disclose the details of the will. Do they have the right to do that?" "Absolutely not," Lorraine replied confidently. "Your will is a confidential document. No one, including your relatives or their lawyers, has the right to demand its disclosure during your lifetime. You can ignore this letter, or if you prefer, I can respond on your behalf, explaining the legal situation. If you could, please respond, I requested, and let them know that any further attempts to pressure me will be considered harassment. I will, Lorraine promised. By the way, Irma, I received the documents from Mr. Wells regarding the possible sale of the apartment. Everything looks fine and the price is fair. If you decide to buy, I can take care of the paperwork. Thank you, Lorraine. I'm almost certain I want to buy. I just need to think through some of the details. After talking to Lorraine, I felt calmer. The law was on my side, and Tabitha couldn't do anything to find out the contents of my will, let alone change it. It was an empty threat, a desperate gesture. That evening, Rosamond called. Grandma, did you get the letter from the lawyer? She asked without preamble. Yes, I did, I confirmed. How did you know? Mom talked about it with Dad. She's very angry. She says you have no right to hide such things from the family. I have every right to dispose of my property as I see fit, I replied calmly, and your mother knows that. She just doesn't want to accept it. I know, Rosamond sighed. It's just, things are really tense at home right now. My mom and dad are always fighting about money, about you, about everything. I felt sorry for my granddaughter. She didn't deserve to be dragged into an adult conflict. I'm sorry you have to go through this, sweetheart. You can always come to me if you need a break from the atmosphere at home. Thank you, Grandma. I'll come on Saturday as usual, okay? Of course. I'll be waiting. After talking to Rosamond, I sat on the porch for a long time, watching the sunset paint the sky shades of pink and gold. I thought about Tabitha, about her stubborn refusal to accept my independence. Part of me still hoped that someday she would understand that it wasn't about money, but about respect. But another part of me knew that was unlikely. Tabitha was too much like her grandmother, my mother-in-law, just as domineering, stubborn, and convinced that she knew best. But unlike Quentin, who had spent his entire life trying to please his mother, I was no longer willing to live up to someone else's expectations. I was 61 years old and finally living the way I wanted to, at my own pace, pursuing my interests, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not what I could give them. Well, July brought even more changes. I finally decided to buy an apartment and began the process of closing the deal with Lorraine's help. Mr. Wells was happy that his home was going to someone who loved and appreciated it. We agreed on a 2-year payment plan, which worked for both of us. In mid-July, Fletcher arrived. He had changed in the 3 years we hadn't seen each other. There was more gray in his dark hair and more wrinkles around his eyes. But his smile was the same, wide, sincere, reminiscent of Quentin's. Mom, you look beautiful, he said, hugging me. You're glowing. I feel wonderful, I replied, leading him into the apartment. Better than I have in years. Fletcher stayed with me for 4 days. We talked a lot, walked around the city, and I showed him my photos and the places I had come to love in Sherville. He told me about his work, his plans to expand his business, and the girl he had recently started dating. We didn't talk about Tabitha or the will. Fletcher, true to his word, didn't try to interfere in our conflict. Only on the last evening, as we sat on the porch with glasses of wine, admiring the stars, did he cautiously broach the subject. Mom, I don't want to pry, but are you happy? Really happy? I thought about it, looking at the stars twinkling in the darkness. Yes, Fletcher, I'm happy. For the first time in a long time, I'm living my own life, not someone else's. I do what I want, I hang out with who I want. It's liberating. He nodded, as if that was the answer he was expecting. I'm happy for you. After Dad died, I was afraid you'd lose yourself. You were so close. But you found your way, and that's great. I miss him every day, I admitted. But I think he would be happy to see me now. He always said I was stronger than I looked. He was right, Fletcher smiled. You've always been strong, Mom. You just can see it now. We sat for a long time, talking about the past, the future, life. When Fletcher left, I felt both sad and satisfied. Sad to see him go, satisfied that my son had grown up to be such an understanding, sensitive person. After he left, I was finally convinced that I had done the right thing. The new life I had built for myself was exactly what I needed. I wasn't going to regret anything. And I had no intention of returning to old patterns of relationships where my feelings and desires didn't matter. In early August, I received another letter from Tabitha's lawyer, this time threatening to sue me for emotional abuse and alienation of family ties. I didn't even bother to read it to the end. I just threw it in the trash with a slight smile. I felt sorry for Tabitha. She was wasting her time, energy, and money on a pointless fight instead of accepting reality and moving on. I decided not to let these letters and threats cloud my life. I had too many interesting things to do and plans to make. I was preparing for a photo exhibition, planning a short trip to the ocean with Eleanor and Martha in September, and thinking about signing up for a pottery class at the community center. On one warm August evening, I was sitting in my garden, sorting through photos for the upcoming exhibition. The sun was setting, painting everything around me in golden hues. A light breeze carried the scent of blooming roses and lavender. Jazz music drifted in from the open window of the house next door. Mr. Wells loved to listen to music in the evenings. I looked at the photos I had taken over the past few months, the play of light and shadow in the park, raindrops on leaves, the smiling faces of my new friends, Rosamond's pensive profile as she read a book. Each photo was a piece of my new life, each telling its own story. Suddenly, I was overcome with a keen sense of gratitude to fate. If it hadn't been for that argument with Tabitha, if it hadn't been for her cruel words, I might have continued to live in the shadows, never daring to step into the light. Sometimes we need a push, even a painful one, to start moving in the right direction. At 61, my life was not over. It was just beginning. And I was determined to live it on my own terms, surrounded by people who truly appreciated me and my love, without demanding money, submission, or the renunciation of my own identity in return. Sitting in the garden, watching the last rays of the sun gild the treetops, I felt absolute peace and confidence. Whatever the future held, I was ready to meet it with an open heart and a clear mind. I had found my path, my voice, my place in the world, and no one could take that away from me.